I'm Dr. Craig Escude, the host of IDD Health Matters, a podcast where we talk about health, wellness, and health equity for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Hope you enjoy it. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the IDD Health Matters podcast. I am really excited to introduce our guest today, Jenna Bainbridge. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Jenna, you've done so many interesting things and are doing so many interesting things. I want you to start off and just tell your story rather than me just fumbling around, not knowing where to go. So tell us what you do and who you are.
Yeah. So the Cliff Notes version, I am always juggling many different balls. So I am a Broadway actor. I am a disability rights advocate, and I am also the founder of a nonprofit called Consultability. And we work with arts institutions to make them more accessible for people with disabilities, on stage, off stage, backstage, in the audience. Anybody with a disability who might be interacting with an arts institution. We help to make that experience more accessible. And all of these things have always intersected in my life. So it's been really rewarding to find pathways to start to implement some of these ideas that have always been in my mind, but in three kind of very separate parts of my life. They're now kind of all coming together.
So I know the Broadway actor part, everybody is going to really want to hear about, but I want to get back to how did you become interested in the disability aspect of what you're doing?
Yeah. So I myself have a disability. I became paralyzed when I was 16 months old. There's still some mystery about what my disability is. Diagnoses are complicated and they're always changing and adjusting and adapting. So for the most part, the general consensus is that I have some sort of spinal cord injury that I sustained at 16 months. So now I am partially paralyzed from the waist down, and I am an ambulatory wheelchair user. So when I walk, I have a pronounced limp and fatigue pretty quickly. So I use a wheelchair for ease, for distance, and to prevent tripping. So I've always kind of lived, exactly, yeah. And I've always kind of lived my life in that gray area of, I had doctors and teachers and, peers telling me that using a wheelchair was bad for whatever reason. It'd be, because you can walk, you shouldn't use a wheelchair. And then, other doctors and physical therapists and other peers telling me, why aren't you, you could be using a wheelchair. This could make your life easier. And so I always kind of lived in that gray area of am I a wheelchair user? Am I not? And for so long, I thought it was a binary. I thought it was all or nothing. If I was using my wheelchair, in my mind, it meant that I was giving something up, that I was, if I use my wheelchair, it means I can't walk anymore. And that's just simply not the case. And so I now firmly identify as an ambulatory wheelchair user. I am kind of 50-50. If I'm going more than about a single city block, I'm using my wheelchair. And within all of this, my disability has also, my disability has informed every single aspect of my life, as I think it does for so many people. But my disability really led me to theater because I was an incredibly active child and loved sports, played every sport that I could find. I skied, I rode horses, I played baseball, I played volleyball. I have my black belt in karate. I was all obsessed with sports. And around middle school, sports became more competitive. It stopped being, about teamwork and camaraderie and started becoming about winning competitions.
Win? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that became a hostile environment for me. That became someplace where suddenly I wasn't welcomed on teams. Despite my athletic ability, I was pushed into, people wanted to separate me. And my mom looked at this and was like, this doesn't feel safe. And so she very intelligently. Oh, Siri thought I was talking to her.
No problem.
My mother said, hey, you love singing. I'd been in choir at the time. She was like, you love singing and you love performing. What if instead of doing volleyball this year, what if you auditioned for a theater company? And she started, really putting in front of me this idea of like, let's get into theater, let's get into choir, let's nurture these interests that you have. And so it never felt to me at the time like we were closing the door on sports. It was just like, oh, I'm interested in these things now. Mm-hmm. And I think she was so smart to just be like, look what's in this door over here. It's a lot of the same skills.
That's a great way, to focus on something different with, like you said, without closing the door to it. Mm-hmm. And also to focus on the fact that you can do pretty much whatever you want, instead of saying, oh, you 100%. Can't do this because, mm-hmm. you can't play basketball because, mm-hmm. you walk differently or whatever.
Right.
So that was really good on her part, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think if there had been more inclusive sports in my area, like if I had known that there was wheelchair tennis at the time, which I had no idea existed when I was 12 years old, who knows, things might have been different. But
you could be a tennis star instead of a Broadway star.
100%. There's so many different paths we could take. But I grew up in Denver, Colorado, and there was a theater company there called Family Theater, spelled PHAMALY, and they hire entirely actors with disabilities. Oh. So that was the opportunity that we saw. So my mom took me to see a show and I was hooked, started auditioning for theaters and, really found my love and my passion there. And it was because of the opportunities that were available in my area.
So I'm not ready to get to what you're doing on Broadway yet, but because I know I'm anxious because I honestly looked into it just enough, but I don't like to get too, overly prepared before I talk with someone. So, going back to the difficulty in kind of deciding about the wheelchair use or not using the wheelchair use. Before that point, it sounds like you had clinicians saying, no, you should not be doing this. And you had another group of clinicians that are saying, yeah, why aren't you doing this?
Yeah.
So was that a bit of a challenge for you from a, I guess, like an emotional standpoint, in feeling like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't do this because I'm not, I can walk, or emotionally though, or maybe I should be doing this, but, these people said I shouldn't be. So it's like feeling this and having these conflicts and these recommendations from different groups of people. How did you feel about all of that before you kind of came to where you are and how you use a wheelchair?
Honestly, I had a lot of internalized ableism from all of it, and just from the world, from what I was learning as a small child. Like, I didn't see examples of disabled adults thriving. I didn't have that viewpoint of the world. So
why?
For a lot of...
Why?
Yeah.
Why do you think you didn't have that viewpoint?
I think a lot of it was because we don't see it in media, right? So if you don't have somebody in your immediate family or in your immediate, friend circle at that time, and I think still today, you don't see a path, you don't see an option. And when we have more representation in media, and I think this is true for every marginalized group, when you see an example of success, and maybe that version is on TV, you see an option, you see a path forward, you see that you can find community and find growth and find fulfillment. And for me, I really internalized, well, if I can just, quote unquote, be normal, then I have a path. So if I'm not using my wheelchair, if I don't ask for accommodations, if I can just force myself to fit into the status quo, then I'll be okay. And I had internalized, if I add my wheelchair into that equation, suddenly I need accommodations. Suddenly the whole world views me differently. Whereas if I'm just walking, maybe people will notice my limp, but if I'm sitting there, nobody will notice, right? Or if I put a knee brace on, everyone's going to assume it's temporary.
Yeah.
And that was, something that I thought about all the time as a kid, and especially as like a preteen. And family was the first time that I met adults with disabilities. And I saw, oh, this is incredibly fulfilling life to have. And embracing my disability won't take any of that away from me. And in fact, could instead make the world a better place for somebody else. If I can embrace and love if I can embrace my disability and love myself, then the next little girl can see an option. If I'm, especially because I love performing, I was meeting kids every day. I did Beauty and the Beast when I was a senior in high school, and, met little kids every single day. And a lot of them had disabilities and were telling me how important it was to them to see a disabled princess, something they'd never seen before. Suddenly they were viewing themselves as like, oh, I can be a princess. I can be a romantic lead. I can be the smartest girl in town. And my disability can be a part of all of those identities.
Now, that's a perfect lead into your disability being a part of what you do and bringing it in, connecting all of these dots. So how does that work? You can say it now. How does that work in the current show that you're in? And what is that show?
Yes. So I am currently in Wicked on Broadway. I play Nessa Rose, and I am the first wheelchair user to play the role on stage. Wicked opened in 2003. We had Marissa Bodie portrayed the role in the movie. She is also a wheelchair user. She was the first wheelchair user to play the role, period. And then shortly after the movie came out was when I was cast on Broadway. So it's, Wicked is an incredible show. I grew up with it. It's always been a part of my life. It's something that I've known every single word to, pretty much since it came out. And it's been an interesting journey because I always knew that Nessa was disabled, of course. Like I was watching the show as a kid and being like, great, if I'm ever cast in the show, that's the part I'm playing.
Yeah.
And I knew that, but it had never been done. It had never been done before. And so, I didn't really think about auditioning for it until a couple of years ago. I was doing Suffs, the musical on Broadway. That was my Broadway debut. And when we found out we were closing, I looked at, all right, what other shows are on Broadway? What else could I audition for? And, Nessa, of course, popped out at me because Nessa is a wheelchair user. And so I was like, all right, I think if any show is going to cast me, I think this is the one. And so I asked my manager to set up an audition. But the thing that I always say is that like my disability is always a part of a character. Every single character I play is disabled. They have my disability. The difference is, do they live in a world with or without ableism? And the shows where my character is written as disabled tend to live in worlds where ableism is present because that's informed by the writing style and the character itself. And if I'm playing a non-disabled character, it's just, here's what the world could be. Now this character is disabled, but we're omitting ableism from that story. And, I always enjoy finding my path within these different tales. And Wicked is an interesting one because the story of disability has changed a lot within Wicked. The original book, the character of Nessa Rose has no arms. And for Broadway, they changed her disability to be a wheelchair user. Then adding to that she's been portrayed by non-disabled actors for the majority of its history. It changes a lot of how we think about disability within that show and within the world of Oz. And it's been just such a joy to get to explore this character and explore this world. And it's been nothing but a positive experience. But
well,
yeah.
I'm going to jump in here. First, I want to say I was really excited when I was asked to interview you. My first trip ever to New York, on my first trip, I saw Wicked, and I can't remember exactly what year it was, but it was Wicked was just, it was in its very early years. Mm-hmm. And I was blown away in so many levels when I saw that, the show the first time. Mm-hmm. And I did say the first time because I've seen it a couple more times. But it was
Wicked is one that's hard to see just once. There's so much to take in.
It was incredible. And then, there were so many interesting things, and I'm not going to get into the story, but I just wanted to say I'm very excited to talk with you. The other thing I want to ask you, though, and I think this will work with the disability advocacy that you mm-hmm. do. Ableism. Not a lot of people really have a good understanding of what ableism is. Could mm-hmm. you enlighten us?
Yeah, ableism. Oh gosh, I should probably pull up like a Merriam-Webster definition.
No. But what does it mean to you? That's more important.
Ableism is the pre-existing notions and expectations about what disabled people can do. And, negative expectations about what disabled people can do. It is making assumptions about people's abilities. It is, not having access and then blaming the disabled person for asking for access or requiring access. And it is, in theater and in film, I think it is most evident by the fact that people with disabilities make up, something around 25% of the population, and they are currently being portrayed by about 2% of roles on TV. And of those roles that are written as disabled, only about a quarter of them are being played by disabled performers. So this when you have non-disabled people playing disabled characters, it perpetuates stereotypes and myths and ableism about disability, because it's what people imagine it's like to have a disability as opposed to the actual authentic lived experience. And when we're only showing disability in such a small percentage of roles, it is limiting people's exposure to disability. Disability is a normal part of life. It is something that every single human will interact with at some point. Either you yourself will acquire a disability or someone you love will acquire a disability. And if those two things don't happen, it is because you died before it happened. Every single person will have a disability. So having a positive outlook about accessibility and about disability is beneficial to every single person. And I think that we can do that with media.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. And, here's an example that I can think help people understand ableism a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Let's say all doorknobs on doors were 7 feet. They're right at the top of the door. Mm-hmm. And if your reach is only, you can't reach that high, you are not able to access that door and you can't go mm-hmm. through it. Only people of a certain height could go through that door. Similar type thing. When you think about it that way, let's say you have a building that only has steps to get into. Mm-hmm. Well, people who can't take those steps or use a wheelchair full time, that building is no longer accessible to you if it doesn't have a ramp. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. that's kind of, one way to kind of, think about it or wrap your head around it. It's like, okay, this environment does not allow me access. I'm going to ask them to move the door knobs lower so that people of all heights can get in. And mm-hmm. then you're seen negatively because you asked for something that's pretty reasonable to allow mm-hmm. people to utilize whatever the opportunity or whatever the situation mm-hmm. is. And then people say, why do we have to build this, in this way
Right.
so that everybody can get in? So
Right.
that's the mindset of ableism. It's like, why do we have to do an accommodation for whatever?
Right. And it's often viewed as expensive. It's viewed as, there's also so much confirmation bias in it too, where, businesses will say, well, nobody's asking for that accessibility. And it's like, well, because you've got 6 stairs into your building, no one who needs the access is able to get to you to tell you they need access.
Exactly.
So there's just so many levels to it that people view it as something that's unnecessary. And then, this is always a story I hear from people, suddenly they break their ankle and they have to use crutches for a few months. And they all tell me, oh my God, I was disabled for 3 months once and it was so hard.
Yes.
And I'm like, no, your experience is not my experience. But I am glad you acknowledged that the world is inaccessible, and it doesn't have to be.
And when you said people, could end up disabled at any point in their lives, that's another thing to think about. So when you build accessible spaces and accessible buildings and so on and so forth, you could very well be building them for your own self. One day, you could, out of a simple fall, a car accident, a side effect of some medication. I mean, there are a million reasons.
Yeah. And just regular aging.
All that too.
Like the most peaceful version of it, aging. We want our families to be able to stay in their homes as they age. That's
Absolutely.
Access.
I think a lot of people, speaking of that, as they get older, everyone recognizes this. Well, my house has a lot of steps, and I just want to find a house that's just one level. Perfect example of something benefiting everyone, or people that are aging, or whatever it might be. I want to talk a little bit more now about the advocacy program that you have and what that looks like, and what do you do? What was the name again? Something ability. I forgot it. I'm sorry.
Yes, Consultability.
Consultability. That's it.
Yeah, it's
our company's name is Intellectability, so I remember the ability part. So yeah.
So we see each other.
Yes.
We started Consultability. So I have always found that as an actor with a disability, I tend to be one of the first actors with a disability that works at any given theater. It's 2026 and I'm still having this experience of, we've never hired a disabled actor before. We have no idea where to start with access and accommodation. This is a conversation I have all the time. And this is true of every disabled actor I know, that when we are hired as an actor, we are automatically asked to do consulting work, whether we want to or not, always.
I kind of see that as a good thing, that they're at least asking. I mean, in some way, it seems to be good. Is it a good thing?
Well, we're not being asked formally. Right?
Oh,
we're not being given, hey, here's an additional contract for your extra work. Here's more payment for the extra, from the knowledge that you're giving us. It's just suddenly we're doing 2 or 3 jobs because either no one's asking about our access needs, so we're having to advocate for them and saying, my housing accommodations were not accessible and I need them to be accessible. Or this storyline is harmful. Can we edit it? Or the way that this is being directed is perpetuating a stereotype. This knowledge is things that we carry with us, and we're suddenly being asked to not just be actors, but be teachers and be advocates and be consultants.
I have to say, I totally get the not getting paid for it, but I'm actually impressed that they're asking in the first place and not just expecting you to figure it out.
They're not asking. They're not asking.
Oh, okay.
We're just doing it. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And sometimes they're asking. Like I did have a theater company that said, we're not sure about the accessibility of the set. Could you come to one of our meetings to, talk to our scenic designer about the set? That was a lovely thing to be asked. But what it meant was that I was the only actor in the company who was expected to suddenly go to meetings about the scenic design. Right. I'm not being compensated for that time. I'm being paid the same as the other actors who are not thinking about that. So, it means that we're wearing a lot of different hats, And sometimes it's for very good intentions. People are asking our opinions and our thoughts and for our access needs. And other times it's just assumed. It's, well, we don't know, so Jenna will tell us if it's not accessible, right? You end up having so much more responsibility, and the onus of accessibility and accommodation falls on disabled artists and disabled audience members and disabled staff members to get the access that they need and deserve. So I was doing this work unpaid, unacknowledged. And so my husband and I decided to start a nonprofit where we are that resource. Consultability is that resource. So we work directly with theater companies, arts institutions, universities, to make them more accessible. And we do this through, I think a lot of people view it as like the site visit. We come and visit your spaces and tell you, here are the physical access barriers that are preventing people with disabilities from succeeding in your spaces. And we give them options for how to become more accessible. There's, easy fixes, like, you talked about doorknobs, like changing out a doorknob to put it at a better height or to switch it to a more accessible doorknob is inexpensive. That's something that most carpenters in a theater can do. They can run to Home Depot and just do that same day. A more expensive fix is adding a push button. And not every single theater is going to be able to do that one immediately, but it's something we tell them, immediately. Change out the round doorknobs for a lever doorknobs for a lever doorknob, exactly, or for a push doorknob, or push door, or whatever it may be. But a long-term solution that we encourage you to do is to eventually budget for push buttons, right? So we're giving those options for here's short-term accessibility that could help, X percentage of people, and long-term accessibility, which might cost more money, but it won't in the long run because the disabled population has something like $18 trillion available in economy spending.
And money does talk.
Money talks, and this is 25% of the population. That's a really good market to go after. So yes, it might be a little upfront cost of making something accessible, but if that's in your budget, you don't think of it as a cost. You don't think of that as an expense. You think of it as an investment. It's part of your budget to make things accessible. And here's the things to focus on. That's what we do at Consultability through space audits. But it's also about cultural audits. We come in and we teach workshops to help companies recognize where they are helping and where they are failing their disabled colleagues and consumers and collaborators. That's the big shift. Having a cultural mindset of accessibility and inclusion means that you will eventually have the physical mindset as well, because you recognize those areas that need improvement. And Consultability, we do both. It is a full cultural audit as well as a physical audit so that people are aware of what is accessible and what is not.
I love that you include the cultural aspect of it and you teach people things. None of us are born with all the knowledge to do everything in the whole world. And if we're not trained in how to understand something and how to, work to improve whatever it is, we're not going to do it very well. I talk about this all the time. I have a standard example for that where I am a family physician. If you came to see me to have cataract surgery, it would not go well. Not because I don't care, because I was never trained to do it. So you wouldn't be able to see well after that. I'm pretty darn sure. Or I would refuse to see you because I'm not competent to do this. And we have to train. We do have to train clinicians, there's no doubt, but people have heard me say that enough. But I love that you provide that training because they're going to have a better understanding of why do I need to do this in the first place? they'll just see it in a different way, I think,
Yeah.
because you're going to train them and explain why and provide what sounds like a very step-by-step approach to making these improvements and all. And just going ahead and sending them a list of recommendations is not going to provide the same level of understanding as to why they're doing these things.
Absolutely.
So hopefully you'll have more and more people who understand this as they move maybe to a different program or different facility or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Because if we just tell them, hey, you need to remove all of these stairs and change these door widths and take out all the fluorescent lights, they might not understand why.
Yeah.
Right. And suddenly like, okay, maybe they did that renovation then, but then they might have somebody who comes in with a disability who has different access needs than, perhaps they need, railings in different spots. And if they're telling them, I need this railing, if you don't understand like, oh, access needs vary from individual to individual, you're like, but we already did the thing. We did the checklist.
Yeah.
So it's really about changing that cultural mindset also so that people are able to have those conversations about their own access needs and disclosing their own access needs.
Absolutely. So I don't know how much new construction is going on in Manhattan, but are you getting asked up front to consult with teams that are building buildings so that they have all of the latest accommodations or things that they could put in place to make it easier for everyone to access beforehand, or is it mostly later?
Well, so we are not ADA specialists. We are not, able to give like legal advice on
Gotcha.
what is accessible and, what is not. The other thing that's important to recognize is that in the theater, backstage spaces are not protected by the ADA because they're private spaces. They're not public.
Wow. Yeah.
So the work that we tend to do, we do come in for, new builds where they'll say, here's the blueprints. What do you think? That's been rare. More often than not, we're coming in when a theater says, we are producing this show and we want to make it accessible because we have a technician with a disability or we have a designer with a disability. That tends to be the more common approach right now. But we also have been working with theater companies that are, moving into new spaces and doing renovations and wanting to incorporate access into those renovations. So it's been very rewarding. We've gotten to do a little bit of everything, but generally we're doing more of the, how do we retrofit this 100-year-old theater to make it work right now? What are the accommodations that need to happen?
I'm sure that's a challenge in a lot of ways to do. Mm-hmm. So I get it, but it's something that needs to be done for sure.
Yes.
Yes. So, Jenna, what are some other exciting things that you are doing or involved with or working on that we all ought to know about?
Let's see. What else am I working on? I mean, Wicked is...
But that might keep you a little busy, right?
Yep.
How many
8 shows a week?
8?
8 a week. Yeah, we've got Mondays off. And, it's... I think people often view the show as like, oh, you've got a 3-hour show. That's it. But it's
I do a little
so much more than that
as well. It's a lot more than that. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into it, up front in sleep management and diet and exercise, all these things that we always say are so important. But when you're doing 8 shows a week of a very physical job, you start to realize, oh, if I'm losing out on any one of those, I can't do my job.
Sure.
So it's a lot of focus to try and do 8 shows a week. But I'm also, obviously working with Consultability. We do things like, I've got a webinar today that we're having a public webinar for people to come in and view a presentation and learn a little bit about how they can make their own spaces more accessible. So if people are interested in that, they can follow Consultability it's our company. And we announce those things on social media and our email lists and all of those if people are interested.
So before, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Good. Okay. So before I ask you my always asked last question, and so I'm going to ask you, if people first want to learn about Consultability, what is the website and how can people get in touch with you?
Yes, Consultability is consultability.org is our website. We are also on social media at Consultability on Instagram and Facebook. And then I also have my own separate social media, but I tend to cross post a lot because these are all just facets of my identity. But I'm at Bainbridge Jenna on social media, TikTok and Instagram.
All right. And if people want to learn more about Jenna Bainbridge, how can they, what's the best way to do that?
Probably just social media. I'm very active. I post a lot on TikTok and Instagram, and I have a lot of interests, and I tend to share a lot. But I've got series about roles that are better disabled, where I focus on specific shows and what character I think would be really interesting to be played by a disabled person. So like Cinderella, for example. I think that Prince Charming should be played by a blind or low vision actor, because I think it adds so much nuance and interest to him not recognizing the woman he danced with and using a shoe to try and identify her. I think that it just creates really beautiful storytelling. Similarly, I think that Cinderella should be played by a physically disabled actor, because I'm losing my shoe all the time. Shoes just fall off my feet. So, I think especially like someone with a limb difference or somebody with a limp or maybe a wheelchair user, she sings a whole song about loving her own little corner with her own little chair. And like, how beautiful if that were her wheelchair.
You know what I'm sensing here? I'm sensing a Jenna Bainbridge production coming up at some point in the future where you've written it and cast it and all of that. I have a feeling
at some point for sure that'll happen. So yeah, if people are interested in that type of stuff, I post it all the time. I also do like a fashion series where I look at fashion and talk about how we can make it more accessible, especially for wheelchair users. And I post a lot about the shows I'm doing and, the audiobooks I'm narrating and all the fun stuff.
And another where to find Jenna is, what theater is Wicked in?
Yes, Wicked is playing at the Gershwin Theater on 51st Street in Manhattan. And we're there 8 times a week, year round. And I'll be there for quite a while longer.
I have a question. Is that the theater that it's been in from
Yes, so that's where you saw it. I'm
just going to say the sets are incredible. I mean, and
yes,
just around the stage, it's absolutely amazing.
Wicked is a spectacle. Like, I really think that Wicked is a great, like, first time Broadway show, because I feel like it just exemplifies what our expectations are of Broadway. It's got, I mean, we literally start the show with a confetti cannon. Like, it is like one of the first things that happen is like confetti cannons shoot out of this incredibly intricate set. We have a puppet, a giant dragon puppet hanging above the set that moves in the beginning of the show, and a smoke shoot out of it.
Yeah, it was great.
Right? It's
a good
magical.
Crazy. Yeah,
good so. Crazy. And then you've got these like vocal pyrotechnics, and it's got a great story. It's family friendly. I think it's like a perfect starter Broadway show, and then from there you can find.
Totally agree. Which it's not just a starter one. I think it's time for me to head back over there and see the show again.
Revisit us. Come back again and again.
Absolutely. I'm Dr. Craig Escudé, President of Intellectability. State developmental disability agencies, managed care organizations, and providers across the United States use Intellectability's health risk screening tool, e-learn courses, and person-centered training to improve health equity for people with IDD. Visit replacingrisks.com to learn more about how you can employ these tools with people you support. So here's the last question that I ask everyone. Tell us 3 things, 3 tips, 3 words of wisdom, 3 things you've learned along the way that you think can improve lives of people with any type of disability.
I think that for me, it comes down to awareness of access through three specifics. I think it's through physical access, through disclosure of access needs. And I think that it's important for all of us to acknowledge our own access needs. People with disabilities have access needs, and people without disabilities have access needs. Access comes from acknowledging, here's how I need to get into this space or to interact with this work. So acknowledging that access needs are normal and encouraging people to disclose them. And I think it comes through representation. I think that access, being shown examples of access, means that we have an idea of how to implement it in our own lives. So I think it's those three things. It's physical barriers, it's open lines of communication, and it's representation.
Those are three excellent things. As many times as I've asked people that question at the end, and we've got over 150 something episodes out right now. As much as you would think people would repeat the same thing over and over again, no one has really repeated the same thing, or certainly not in the same way. They have their own perspectives of it. So thank you for sharing your perspective on those things. And I'm thrilled to have been able to talk with you today. And I'm going to look you up or catch you at the back door or whatever if I go anytime soon to Wicked. So keep up the fantastic work that you're doing. It's been a pleasure talking with you. And I don't know. I just thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. This has been such a joy chatting with you today.
The IDD Health Matters podcast is a production of Consultability. Learn more about our health risk reduction tools and training for supporters of people with IDD by visiting replacingrisk.com.